Welcome in to the Formula Un by Americans podcast. I am your host, Patrick Finley, along with my co host, Stephen Harris. Stephen, how was the weekend?
Hello, it was good. Didn't do a whole lot. Spent some time with a girlfriend. Went for a hike. Sleep was on a minimum though because I ended up watching the race live, which is 1 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. whatever it was once it ended. So sleep was on a minimum, but it was a good weekend though. How about
So, so,
yours?
hold on. You said you went for a hike. You live in
Yes.
Orlando. So, where did you go for a
Yes.
hike? Because I'm not seeing any kind of elevation. I'm just seeing like a
Well,
walk.
more of like a trail, I guess you could say. We have some forest reserves here, and they just kind of have trails through them. So, it was a nice little weekend weather-wise. So just tried to take advantage of it.
There you go, man. There you go.
Yeah.
No, I pretty much did tried to do the same thing. I had planned to go fishing with Dad, and Saturday the winds we had 15 to 20 mile an hour winds just sustained,
Ooh.
and then it was we had some gust as well up to 30, I
Mm.
think, and so even some guys that I knew went out fishing, they said it was really windy. So yeah, we so just really kicked around. Did some work on the boat. We got a new sonar we're throwing on there, and
Nice.
then did some bike riding this morning with a buddy of mine that was in town, and watched a race. So it was
Yeah.
a good weekend overall, but zero complaints. But I will say,
There you go.
Stephen, talking about the weekend, one thing that
Hmm.
I did do was I did a little. You and I have been talking about this for some time because we've just been promoting the podcast on YouTube. So did some digging and actually found us a platform where we can do all of our recording, and then we can also push to all of the different podcast channels. So we will no longer be only on YouTube. You can find us on your popular, whichever one it is, Apple, Android, whatever they have over there, Amazon, Spotify. So that's something new and exciting for the Formula Un guys.
Yes, definitely. Excited for the new air.
New era indeed. But we do need some help from our listeners. So we have a studio now. We need a name. So you can follow us on Twitter at Formula Un by USA. So give us a follow over there and then drop over some comments about a possible name for our studio. And I'm hoping our good friend of the show, Mr. Rob Brasington, he will drop in a name or two for us. So he is always crafty like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's got a couple, I'm pretty sure.
I'm, I'm, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. Well, let's dive in a little bit to some news and notes from the world of Formula One because that's why our listeners are here. They want to know what's going on inside the Formula One world. And the number one thing that I wanted to bring up is so the Audi and Porsche rumors continue. What are your thoughts? And we'll talk about this possible partnership with Austin Martin in just a minute. But just what are your thoughts? I mean, these are rumors that have been going on for a long time, Stephen. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, that was kind of my thought too. It's like I feel like I've started watching. I think it was 2018. I think it's rumors have been ever since then, if not even before then. So I kind of get a little bit numb to them. But I would say like motorsport.com is one that's reporting the Aston Martin Audi link. So that's a pretty credible site. So I don't know. Maybe there may actually be some movement towards this. So we'll see. What's your
Yeah,
your take on it?
no, I agree. I think there's I think there's two things here. One, I love motorsport.com. I use it a lot for what's going on inside the world of racing.
Hmm.
Not just Formula One, but NASCAR, IndyCar, MotoGP, and all that other stuff. But I will say, they were also the ones that did break the news that Audi was going to buy out McLaren.
Mm.
So yes, they are credit creditable
Yes.
to some extent. Sometimes some words just don't want to come out.
Right.
But no, I agree. I think I definitely think there's more smoke to this fire because even when Lawrence Stroll was asked about it, and listeners, if you're not familiar, um, there was a news article that came out over the week that Audi is in a potential tie-up, link-up partnership with Aston Martin to be an engine supplier, and that
Mm.
would help boost Aston hopefully up the grid, which is Lawrence Stroll's ambition. But there's also been some additional rumors as well that Audi would, Audi or Porsche. Well, Porsche I think is directly linked to Red Bull, but
Hmm.
Audi, there's some potential rumors that Audi is going to link up with Williams. That's been one of the ones that's been chunked out there. A buyout of McLaren, but that now seems to be on the back burner. And then now Aston. So I think that's something for us to watch. I think, Stephen, did you hear it correctly that they're kind of waiting on the engine rules of 2026?
Yes. Yeah. It seems like that's probably what they're targeting, at least from what I've been reading. So.
Well, hopefully here soon we will have that news and finally put all of that to rest because it has been going on a while.
Right.
The second news, and I think this comes on the heels of everything that we've heard recently about the Las Vegas F1 race next year. We've got the Miami GP, which will be in a couple weeks, and then we've got also the COTA race that has been happening every year for the last couple of years, minus
Mhm.
COVID. That Andretti F1 and Michael Andretti, who owns Andretti Autosports and has Formula E teams, he's got his IndyCar team. I think he's got some other teams as well, but
Mhm.
he is trying to get a F1 team and has made his proposal to the FIA. But news came out this week that Mr. Andretti has not heard back from the FIA. Stephen, does that surprise you any?
Um, I don't really know how to have an opinion on that. I guess for myself, just because since I've been following F1, there's really not been a new team that's been established. There've been some transition, but I haven't seen a new team pop up on the grid, so I don't really know what that process looks like. But I would kind of ask you kind of more from a historical approach, like is that something that surprises you, or is that something that typically it takes a good amount of time to get a new team locked in and ready to go?
So I think it differs, um, just depending on the backing of the team. I think there's some questions over Andretti's backing, although he did come in as he does seem to have what appears to be great backing. From my
Hmm.
understanding, he took a deal, he took a SPAC deal to basically raise his funds to the NYSE.
Hmm.
So, but you're right. It has been a little bit of time since a new team did come into play. A lot of times, what you saw were other teams buying out existing teams. The
Hmm.
last time, well, I mean Haas. So Haas was an all new startup.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so Haas was an all new startup, and I'm trying to think of anybody else on the. I mean, just a lot of consolidation currently on the grid, just among
Right. Yeah.
teams that have been just passed down. So Haas is the most recent, but for some reason that, I and I don't know the time that I don't remember the timeline from when Haas announced it,
Hmm.
and if he already had like the approval of the FIA before he like made it announcement, right? Whereas
True.
Andretti has been
Hmm.
really, really pursuing getting this team and went down a couple different avenues with, I think he, my understanding was there was some talks with Williams at one point. There was also some talks with Haas at one point when they
Hmm.
were in some financial struggle. And then the most notable was Alpha when he had the conversations with Alpha last year that everybody thought during the weekend of the U.S. Grand Prix that was going to be announced, and that's the weekend that actually fell apart. So, but
Yeah.
that's a good question because I'm not 100% positive about the timeline of when he first announced it and when it was actually announced.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, because and Michael Andretti has been pretty outspoken about it too. It's not been something he's like keeping under wraps. He's been telling everybody he's got it and he has the funding and he's ready to go type of thing. So
So hopefully that can get wrapped up here soon. And because I know Michael at one point said, "Hey, look, we either need to get our approval or we're going to move on," and so he could have the team ready. I don't
hmm,
think it was 2023 is what he was shooting for. I think it's 2024. Um, but hopefully, hopefully soon that will come to light, and maybe he can get the green light on that to get his team on the grid.
yeah.
Steven, speaking of the grid, what did you think about the weekend down under? Just overall, not the race, but just
Well,
overall the weekend.
yeah, I thought it was really good. It was good to be back in Australia. I think that the track was the changes they made to it. I think were really good. And but yeah, more than anything, just it's good to be back in different places where we haven't been in a few years or a couple years, I guess, on some of these. So I enjoyed it overall. What was your overall take on it?
I agree. It was great to be back in Australia. Australia generally is the track that F1 starts at, so a little bit different not to be there starting the season this year. But I think overall it was funny because I actually couldn't remember the past layout in my head until they showed the couple chicanes and then like the flattening of one curve or something like that there towards 11.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So some of that I had not really thought about until they and I thought Sky F1 did a great job of showing the modifications like
Mm-hmm.
here's the old and here's what the new looks like. And I
Right.
think
Yeah.
I think the so that was really good to be there. Also, apparently, the Australian Grand Prix was the largest sporting event ever hosted in Australia. Over 450,000 people in attendance over the weekend. That is insane.
It's really incredible. That's even larger than Coda last year, which was the largest attended F1 race. So that Australia now takes that record. So
Do they? Because
yes,
I want to say Coda was over 452.
well maybe I'm wrong. I had seen where they said that it was 400,000 for that, but I could be wrong on
Okay,
that. I may have
okay.
got bad information there. But yeah, it definitely was the largest event, sporting event in Australian history. So that's definitely something to talk about because that's a lot of people. So
So let me ask you a question. Did you watch? How much of the sessions did you watch? Let's be honest here.
Um, I watched all of the FP1, all of qualifying, and then the race. That was it though.
Okay.
I didn't
I
see two or three.
was I was FP3 qualifying and then the race. So and let me make well, I will say this. When I watched FP3 and qualifying, for some reason I woke up and so I was like, whatever, I'm
Hmm.
just gonna watch it. I'm usually not up at
Right.
that time.
Hmm.
And the race, I was like, I've got to be worth something on Sunday, so I'm just gonna get up early. So I got up at about 5:30 before I had time to jump on social media and find out who won. So watched it about
Hmm.
5:30, and overall was I thought it was a good race. I didn't think it was a great race by any means. I didn't think,
Hmm.
especially coming off the last two races,
True.
I I just thought it was I thought it was okay. What was
Hmm.
your thoughts on the race, Stephen?
Yeah, I would agree on that. I thought it was kind of just okay. There really wasn't. I was hoping for maybe some mixes in strategy, but didn't really see that much. And yeah, especially in comparison to the first two races, it was definitely the least entertaining of them all, I guess. So, um, which let's talk about. The one concern that we had coming in was overtaking. That's kind of been an issue with Australia in the past. Um, what was your take on the new track versus the old track? Did you see more overtaking or a better track for a race than what it's been previously?
I actually think it kind of stayed the same. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. There was a couple of spots where I felt like the guys could pass, and after that long straightaway, I think it's like coming out of like 9 going into 10
Mm-hmm.
where Carlos had his incident.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a spot, and I saw some passing, a lot of it enabled by DRS.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just I haven't seen the numbers on the passing. It's it's one of the lower tracks, and if you follow
Mm-hmm.
us on Twitter, I posted a stat on there that it's like the fourth least passing track on. I mean, Monaco is by far the worst, but this is one that is up there as in one of the worst tracks for passing. And I think they certainly tried, but I just and McLaren talked about it too a little bit as to why their car was a little bit better this weekend. It's a flowy track, and so I think when you have those more
Mm-hmm.
flowy tracks, I think that hurts the passing because you're not having these breaking points coming in
Mm-hmm.
that opens up the opportunity to pass. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, especially if you think what is it turn what is the slowest turn on that? But there's not really a straight going into it. It's a slower turn, so there's really not opportunity to overtake on the slowest part of the track. I do think that it was a little bit better. I felt from what my memory wise, but like you said, I haven't seen the numbers to really know one way or the other. Um, but I did feel like it was a slight improvement. But my memory could be bad on that too. So, um, but yeah, you're right. It's definitely more in the still a flowy track, and it does seem like overtaking stuff when you get into those type of tracks, anyways. So it could be just kind of a flaw of that track to begin with, in a
Just
sense
in
that
general, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah,
overall, Charles just dominated the race. So he
mm,
took the pole,
mm,
he took the fastest lap, he led every lap, and he took the win. So they
mm,
consider that in Formula One to be the Grand Slam, and so he definitely did that this weekend and was just dominated or just
Yeah.
dominating and I can tell a difference too in Charles. Like even after the race, when they came on to, he was the winner, like he was very subdued. Like his thing is just
Hmm.
let's go, and that's it.
Hmm. Right.
Like he's
Right.
not hollering, he's not screaming,
Hmm.
and I I know it's early. This is third race. It's hard for me not to think that this is his year. I mean, he just seems like
Hmm.
he is focused.
Yes. Yeah. And to piggyback off that a little bit, even post race interviews or interviews outside of racing, there's his like how he phrases things, how he's like saying like it's about getting better. It's like there's not the least bit of like we've arrived. It's like I'm still grinding away to get better, to understand this car better. I feel like Ferrari as a whole kind of has that mentality, and um, I think that will serve them well this season as well, where they're just continually trying to get better as opposed to being like, hey, we're in first place, check us out type of thing. So there's a real, you know, focus that they have on just continuing to get better and get the best out of the car, which I think is, just you kind of see a certain maturity, I guess, out of that in a sense, especially for as young as Charles is. I feel like he's had 3 weeks of just very professional, mature drives. That's been really impressive to see. So,
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And it's good to see him excelling at this level
mhm,
in a Ferrari because that's where he always wanted to be. And so he's
mhm,
definitely excelling for sure.
mhm,
So let me ask you, better weekend this weekend, and we're gonna throw
mhm.
out Ferrari because they kind of were on both ends of the spectrum, good and bad. But McLaren or Mercedes, who had a better weekend?
I think I would have to go with Mercedes on this. I think you could argue in qualifying, Alonso being out, Sainz kind of getting caught out definitely benefited Mercedes. Kind of gave them a couple places, if you will. Um, but I think overall, how they came into the week where they still are struggling for pace, and then to end the weekend with a P3 and P4, just is really just making the best and the most out of what's been a struggle of the season so far. And so, um, despite having a or a car that's just not performing at the level that they expect, they still seem to be finding the points and taking advantage of what they can when they can. So, for me, I felt like that made the better weekend for them. What's your take? Are you with McLaren?
Yeah, I really think McLaren had a great weekend. They double pointed, which is the first time this year they've
Hmm.
done that.
Hmm.
Finished fifth and sixth, so compared to their, I would say compared to their first race where they just absolutely struggled and it looked like they were going to be back markers for the season.
Hmm. Hmm.
For Lando to qualify fourth and Danny Rick sixth, and then them come back in the race and back that up because like I think you can make that same argument. Carlos off, Alonso
Hmm.
off, that could have been up ahead of them, but I really thought that just their weekend overall, flawless on the pit stops. I thought they really looked good
Hmm.
strategy wise.
Hmm.
Yeah, to me, they just shined this weekend, and hopefully
Yeah.
that's a thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's a sign of times to come. And
Hmm.
I must also be fully transparent that I'm sitting here in my McLaren T-shirt right now.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, it was definitely a big step forward. I felt like they went from being, seventh, eighth in the constructors to all of a sudden being like they could be three or four, So
Yeah.
it was definitely a big weekend for him for sure. So and good to see
S-
Danny Rick at home, getting
Yeah,
a
get some
good
points.
drive, So
Yep.
yeah, that's always a good thing.
So speaking of biggest loser this weekend, Max, Carlos, and let's throw in Seb there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Seb was pretty disastrous, but I feel bad for him coming back from COVID. But I would have to say the biggest loser would be Max to me. Um, Now he is in a bit of a hole now, and really not necessarily his fault, given that he has two DNFs out of the three races.
Hmm.
When he has been driving, he's been driving really well, um, and really seems to be right there with Charles. It seems like for the most part, even though he was maybe a few seconds off this weekend, but yeah, now I think I believe if I counted right, I think it's like 46 points in the hole to Charles Leclerc, and like I said, two out of three have been DNFs. That's just a really big hole to find yourself in, only three races in. So it'll be interesting to see how they fight back. I'm pretty sure, Ferrari's going to have, their issues, kind of like Carlos did this weekend. But yeah, I feel like Max lost the most this weekend, despite really not really being his fault. So,
Yeah.
what's your take on it, Patrick?
Yeah, I have to say for me, I think Seb very hard to come back, get back in the flow of racing after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or however long it's been. I guess it's really been about a month, really. So
Mm-hmm.
really hard to get back into the flow of things, and just nothing seemed to. I mean, all weekend, Aston, nothing seemed to go their way. So they're
Mm-hmm.
off on, they're outliers this weekend, is what I'm considering that. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, I would say biggest loser was Carlos. I think this weekend was a great opportunity for him to continue to build confidence, and he had a strong race car. He got caught out by the red flag in qualifying and
Mm-hmm.
qualified ninth, and so he was already on the back foot. And then he was just trying to press so hard to to pass those back markers, and because he knew, I think he knew that he had to get up ahead of those guys to stay in contention in the race, and just absolutely threw it away. And now Charles has 2 wins on the season, and Carlos has you know nothing really. I mean, he's got a couple points
Mm-hmm.
finishes, but just in
Mm-hmm.
general, I think this could have been a great race for him if he would have qualified well. That he could have been up there competing with Charles, because you
Mm-hmm.
saw the gap from first to second. I mean, the gap from first
Mm-hmm.
to second back to Checo. I mean, it was 13 seconds, 14 seconds. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Charles was just doing what he wanted. Checo was doing what he wanted, and then it was Lewis and or George and Lewis, and I think it was Checo that came on the radio and was like, "You guys still there?
Right, right.
You
Yeah, no,
awake?"
that's yeah. Yeah, I mean that's definitely a great point. I guess one a follow up to that with him being cut out in qualifying like that. Were you surprised at how quickly they went to the red flag, despite having? Um, I mean, we're talking. Carlos was like a second away from the line when they pulled out the red, or seemed very close, and then he had George Russell behind him on that final corner.
Well, so that's a good question. I think as the race director, you had in a situation like that. I think if it was a race situation
Hmm.
where people were coming through, and I think it's a different situation. But because you had cars kind of spread all over the track,
Hmm.
there was nothing. I mean, could they have gone to a yellow a little bit longer? But also, like, they knew we got to throw the red flag here to allow some people additional time, right?
That's
Um,
true. Yeah.
so it's a tough call, especially without seeing like is somebody barreling down on that section um, where the accident happened, and I wasn't watching. I didn't have the data up to see where all the cars were, so it's hard for me to make a call, and I don't want the race director position.
Right. Right. Yeah. After the season finale last year, I think that's the least wanted job.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, speaking of last year, let's unless there's anything else you wanted to hit on the Australian race, I think we can look forward to the race on the 24th, which is in Imola. And
Yes.
this, I think Imola is always a great race. It's a track with a lot of history, and last year provided more of that with George and Valeri getting tangled up and
Mhm.
the fieriness that came out of George. And if you watch Drive to Survive, you got to see all the behind the scenes on that. Great run from Lando last year, finishing third, Lewis second, and then Max won. So I guess the big question, Steven, is can Max do it again this year?
Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like Imola is a little bit more towards Ferrari, um, but I mean, Max has been driving really well. I think Red Bull will be prepared, and they'll also. I think they're going to start being have to be a bit aggressive with Max to try to get him back into the championship. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be one of those races where it's early on, but they gotta perform well. So I think the pressure's more on Red Bull, but they seem to respond well to that, given last year and all the pressure they were under, and still came out with the championship, or Max did. So yeah, I mean I think it's definitely going to be an interesting race to watch because it's early, but it's really a big one for Max. So what do you think? Do you think the track suits Red Bull more than Ferrari?
I I would lean more probably towards Ferrari on this one. A little bit more, the you don't have the long straightaways that you do. I mean, you've got
Hmm.
some. I guess that front straightaway is pretty long, so I think that's a great opportunity for Max. But overall, I think Ferrari is going to bring a good car. I think they're going to be the ones to beat again because you have to take into account can Max even make it to the finish line?
Yeah, right.
Because, well, I mean, so the issue today turned out to be another fuel issue, but it's not the same
Hmm.
fuel issue that happened at Bahrain.
All right. Yeah.
So, you know, Lewis said that Mercedes is chasing gremlins. I really feel like Red Bull is as well. So,
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
so I'm gonna go Charles, and you're gonna go Max.
Uh, I'll go. You know what? I'll go Carlos.
Oh wow,
Carlos
Carlos
Sainz.
with the comeback, with the
I'm gonna
comeback.
take a shot on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here's the best thing about the 24th. We also have the first preview
Yes.
of what the sprints are going to look like under this year's rules package. And I really
Mhm.
think that we could see some great racing in those sprint races. Your thoughts?
Yes, I think so too. I think the way that the, how they're able to stay closer to each other, um, being a shorter race, they can kind of push harder. So I think it could be a close field with a lot of movement, and it'll be very interesting to see for sure. I think we'll see more value out of it than what we did last year overall. So I'm excited for it.
Yep.
What are you thinking on it?
Yeah, man, me too. I was actually hoping that Emma would be the first one. So
Mm.
to now know that it is. I looked this afternoon is before we recorded. I was like, yeah, yeah, and it is. So I think that's really gonna spice up the weekend. So I'm really excited to see what happens that weekend.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Steven, that's all I've got, man. Do you have anything else on your side of things that you wanted to bring up before we wrap the show up this week?
No, I think that kind of covers everything. I'm excited for all the new podcasts and everything. So, um, hopefully, hopefully we'll be on there on all these services here soon, and I'm excited for the rest of this season. So,
I am as well, man, and we will try just for future going forward. We will try to have these out within a couple days of the race for sure. So
mhm,
we, we're providing a good, recent, relevant follow up instead of waiting a week. But I think now we're in a good position to do it with all the new technology we've enabled here. And like I
mhm,
said before, give us a follow over on Twitter at Formula Un by USA. We'll be posting relevant content and may even throw up some polls like better weekend, McLaren or Mercedes, or biggest
mhm.
loser, Max, Carlos, or Seb. So give the old Twitter a look once you hear the podcast and vote. And hopefully we'll have some people to vote on that and we can tell you who won.